Hello athletes, Travis here, back with what I hope to be a quick little video talking about the best way, the easiest way you can undermine your training activities, alright? And that is going to be this idea of cut and paste training programs, alright? Of looking what other people are doing and then doing that yourself without any appreciation for the context of the training as a whole. And there's this common thing, which is true if taken the way it's meant to be, of the best coaches, the best are good thieves. All right, so the best coaches are taking ideas from other things, incorporating it into what they're doing, and going. All right. The problem with a lot of people will be like, they'll be like, well, what workouts are you doing? And someone will say, well, I'm doing, 5 by 500 meters, with X amount of rest. And they'll be like, and I'm doing pretty good. And someone will like, all right, well, I'll take that and I'll plug it into my program. All right. Training is not cut and paste. All right. That 6 by 500 meters has a context. It has a context of what they're doing for the rest of that week, even for the rest of that day. It has a context of how they're warming up for that, how they're warming down from it. It has a context of what they're doing for their month, their season, their year. There's context to it. And another problem is that when you ask an athlete what they are doing, I'm guilty of this, all right, and I always kick myself when I do it and catch myself doing it. When you ask an athlete about their training, they are going to default to the ideal of their training, to their best sessions. If you say, how much training, when you're doing steady state, how much steady state you're doing? And I'm like, oh, well, I'll do 60-minute steady states. And then they're gonna be like, all right, well, I'll do 60-minute steady states. And so what that person is gonna take from that is gonna be every day, I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna get 60-minute steady states. What's the reality of that? The reality of that is 2 days a week, I do 60-minute steady states, and other days I might do 30-minute steady state, and other day I might do something that's not steady state, or I might do a lift or whatnot. But when somebody asks me, by nature, our instinct is to be like, I do 60-minute steady states. Because those are the most salient, those are the most impactful, those are the ones that stand out in your head. All right. But if that person that's asking, oh, wow, you're doing really well, you did really well in that race, what do you do for training? And you're like, well, I do a lot of 60-minute steady states. They are going to interpret that different. All right. We're going to interpret that different if we hear somebody that says that. All right. It is essential that you understand the context. And there was a great story that I heard very early in my coaching career. Actually, it might have even been before I started coaching and when I was still an athlete. I went to a conference that was hosted by Best-Bowley up in Philadelphia, and it had some great speakers. It had like Martin McElroy and whoever the Australian coach was at that time, the 8 coach, and then Mike Tatey was there, Chris Korsanowski was there, and I forget whether it was Mike or Chris. I think it was probably Chris that had this story about when they were training. And I think it was the Germans. They were doing really well, and somehow it got back of like, what are the Germans doing? Like, they're killing it. They're doing really well. And what are they doing with the training? And it came back that the Germans were just doing 500-meter pieces all the time. 500-meter pieces. Row 500 meters, row back to start, row 500 meters again, max ever. And so those coaches were then like, all right, well, they're doing a ton of that 500-meter piece, so we're going to start to do that. And lo and behold, they're underperforming once they get there. And then I don't know if it was at the end of the season or even several years later where they found out exactly what was happening. But it turned out that the water that this team was training on was so bad and so rough that they basically had to row, I think it was like 10 miles a day, to get this little cove of water that only had about 500 meters of space in it, the protected cove. And so they would practice all their high rate stuff in this protected water that was only 500 meters long. They would do their 500s, and then they would row that 10 miles back to the dock. All right. So the context of that, completely different than what was heard and interpreted by someone saying, well, they're doing 500 meters all the time, and that's the only thing they do for their training. And so there's so much more behind the scenes that when you're trying to cut and paste training, where you're just like, well, what's he doing? I'm going to do that you're missing. All right. And so another example I give athletes is that you could have the best 5 books, in the history, the best 5 books that have ever been written. All right. If you just cut chapters from those books and throw them together and to make your own book, that is going to be one shitty book that makes absolutely no sense. Has no story, has no context. It is very disruptive to your reading experience at the time. It's the exact same thing with training. All right, if you look at 6 championship teams and you take cut and paste workouts that you like from those 6 teams and you make it into your own, you are going to be an absolute mess. All right, there is no context to that. It is not going to work. All right, and the reality is that when you're taking those things, when you're cut and pasting, you're cut and pasting what's sexy. All right, you're cut and pasting that romantic dinner that, you know, a married couple have, for that someone that's been married for 10 years, they have date night once a week, once a month, whatever it is, and you're basically taking that date night and be like, oh man, they have such a kind of like a good kind of fresh relationship, and you're not looking at the rest of the 6 days of that. All right, all the nitty gritty of what a real relationship is, and the work and the conflict and the monotony of it, and you're not realizing what really goes on behind the scenes, what really goes into that relationship. You're just taking that one night and being like, oh, they have a really great connection, they're really kind of keeping things interesting. Same thing with training. All right, you know, 80% or more of training is kind of boring. If you're an endurance athlete, it's not too sexy, it's not too exciting. All right, and that little bit of exciting stuff, that's what kind of sticks. All right, and so if you're out there and you're trying to find out what to do and you're asking around, don't get pulled into that error. All right, don't just drift to what the sexy part is. Get to what the work part is. Get to what behind the scenes is. Don't just ask, well, what workouts are you doing? Ask, what are you doing on the other days? What are you doing when you're taking it easy? What are you doing that's not working? Ask those questions. If you really want to understand what goes on behind an athlete, ask more questions, ask better questions. Get them to reveal the truth, reveal the not fun stuff. Same idea if you go and you ask somebody, how's your day going? Or someone asks you, how your day's going? Your instinct's probably going to be like, that's fine, thanks. You may be having the shittiest day in the world that day. All right, your dog you may have just had to put down your dog. You may have just broken up with your girlfriend. You may just be overwhelmed with work and a project. You may be depressed about something that's happening in your life, or whatever it might be. You may have had a horrible night of sleep. You may have had a horrible workout. If someone asks you, how's your day going? You're going to say fine. All right, so you need to be aware, you know, in that situation of being like, oh, everything's all right with that person. Same thing with training. You know, you ask somebody what they're doing with training, they're going to give you the nice, shiny, glossy stuff. They're not going to give you the truth. All right, so be careful. All right, so if you're out there, you're looking for answers, what to do with your training, be very skeptical, be very inquisitive to get the whole picture before you take that and apply it to yourself. And even better than that, find a good coach out there that can work with you directly that also asks you that questions. All right, and that's something that I know for me specifically when I'm getting somebody, you know, as a remote client, there's a reason that the first month costs 2-3 times more than what the normal monthly cost is. Because I'm using that first month to learn everything I can about the athlete, learn their history, learn their strengths and weaknesses, learn that nitty gritty, the not pretty stuff about the athlete, so I can do a better job of giving them training. And almost no coaches out there do that. Certainly not coaches on a team, because they have 20, 40, 60 athletes on that team. They simply lack the time to do that. And I think that's a major loss in our sport, and something, you know, I've heard a lot of coaches say, well, we've really figured out training. We're really at the threshold of training. We really can't get too much more out of our athletes from this, that the next frontier is psychology. That's such utter bullshit. You know, sure, you can get a lot out of athlete by understanding psychology and incorporating psychology into your training, but the hubris and the idea that you figured out training and you're getting, you know, the most you can out of your athletes at the point, it's such utter nonsense. All right, and so, and the biggest threshold for our sport, such a team-oriented sport, such a sport interested in the big picture, because we need to get entire boats moving together and rowing, is to figure out how to do that and to account for the individual of the needs of the athlete, and to adapt the training as best we can to accommodate those individual needs of the athlete. And if you're trying to make 8s fast, if you're trying to make 6 8s fast, or even 2 or 3 8s fast on your team, that is really hard. But guess what? Doing great things is hard. You know, breaking paradigms is hard. And so as a sport, we need to be better at figuring that out. All right, and so think about that as an athlete, Think about that as a coach. Don't cookie cutter your workouts. Look for the whole thing. Do all the not fun work as well as the kind of new exciting workout. It's like, oh, do a minute on, minute off. That's super fun, exciting, it's fast, and it's invigorating. Doing this crazy pyramid where the rates are shifting and you're doing a different, rate every 2 or 3 minutes. That's fun, that's exciting. What you're not seeing is that hour and a half of just chill, steady state. All right, someone's out there doing. They're putting in the miles. All right, it's the trial of miles and miles of trials. All right, Once a Runner, best book for athletes out there. Read it if you haven't already, but that quote is from there. All right, the trial of miles and miles of trials. That's what makes great athletes. All right, but that's it. All right, that's it for this video. Kept it under 11 minutes. How about that? That's amazing. This is Travis signing off with GTS Rowing. Go to gtsrowing.com if you're interested in working with me for your own training. Check out patreon.com/Travis Gardner if you are benefiting from this and you want to help support the expense of making these videos. I would appreciate that. Throw comments below if you have any questions, and that's it. Catch you on the next video. Bye.